begin this week's episode of Weather Extra covering the historic Hurricane Melissa. Melissa made its first landfall on Tuesday, October 28th, near New Hope, Jamaica, with wind gusts of 185 miles per hour and a pressure of 892 millibars. The storm's landfall in Jamaica tied with the Labor Day hurricane of 1935 for the third lowest pressure recorded in a hurricane. Melissa is now on a list of only 7 storms in history with a pressure lower than 900 millibars. This storm also tied Hurricane Dorian from 2019, Gilbert from 1988, the Labor Day hurricane of 35, and Wilma of 05 for the second strongest sustained winds recorded in a hurricane. Melissa is also on a list with only 9 storms in the Atlantic to have had peak sustained winds of 180 miles per hour or higher. Melissa would carve a catastrophic path of destruction. Areas where landfall occurred in Jamaica experienced extreme winds that peeled away roofs and sent debris flying through the air. Hurricane Melissa would make another direct landfall early in the morning on Wednesday in Cuba as a powerful Category 3 hurricane with winds of 120 miles per hour. Thankfully, due to the mountainous terrain of Cuba, Melissa would lose some strength as it moved northeast away from the island, but would pass right through the Bahamas, bringing strong winds and heavy rain. Melissa continued its track northeast and brought hurricane conditions to Bermuda on Thursday, and then would weaken slowly, but would still bring hurricane conditions to the Atlantic Canada region on Halloween. Melissa caused destruction across numerous islands. Days ahead of her first landfall in Jamaica, the storm's outer rain bands brought flooding and landslides to Puerto Rico, Haiti, the Dominican Republic, Costa Rica, and Panama. Hundreds of families were left without power, water, and shelter due to Melissa. We now turn to CBS News' Jason Allen, who was in Jamaica as Melissa struck and has more from those living there as the desperate need of rescue and recovery began.
This is all the damage. Roof has gone, clothes has wet up, and all those stuff. I need some help. Please, I need some help.
From the air, devastation and ruin as far as the eye can see. Similar scenes playing out in eastern Cuba. People there combing through what's left after hurricane-force winds reduced homes and buildings to rubble, trying to salvage what they can, even in communities still completely flooded. Back in Jamaica, we traveled to Santa Cruz, about 2 hours west of Kingston. The town's one working front-end loader shoved mud off the only major roadway connecting this community to hard-hit Black River. Local politician Delroy Slowly.
I drove around and it's really a horrible thing. This is the strongest storm we've ever seen. But in all of it, we still have to give God thanks for it. It could have been worse.
How could this have been worse?
Lives, many lives could have been lost. You see, properties can be replaced, but it's one life you have.
At St. Elizabeth Technical High School.
The students and teachers at this high school, they sheltered in one of the concrete buildings on campus, but this is one of their classrooms. The roof ripped off in the winds, and the walls, they are all piled on top of the desks and chairs where they would have been sitting on a normal day.
While the school is in recovery mode for now, Principal Keith Wellington is determined to give his students the support they need.
It's not even just about school and getting to do their exams, but the period of socialization, what they go through when they're at school with their friends. It helps them mentally. So it's important that we get back to some level of normalcy.
Jason Allen, CBS News in Kingston, Jamaica.
Back here at home, we saw a ton of rainfall across North and Central Texas last weekend. Behind me, you're looking at some of the flooding that impacted downtown Fort Worth. Now, that rain helped out with October's total rainfall and our area's drought conditions. For an update on all of that, here's First Alert Chief Meteorologist Brady Taylor.
Well, through much of the month of October, the major story has been the lack of rainfall and the drought conditions that have been creeping back into Central Texas. Take you back to last Thursday on October 23rd when the drought monitor came out. You can see the yellow shade, abnormally dry conditions across much of Central Texas, sandwiched in by moderate to even severe drought conditions across our northern and southern counties. Take the very healthy rain that we had last weekend, and we've seen dramatic improvements. Pretty much the central parts of our area that were abnormally dry, now no drought concerns, pretty much dropped everything a level. We've still got a little bit of moderate drought, even a small little sliver of slight or severe drought down across parts of Williamson County, but a big improvement. When you look at the calendar, it's dry all except for the 24th and 25th when we had those very healthy rains that have moved through. Overall for the month of October, though, it will still go down as a well below normal month, 2.1 inches below where we should be. Still got burn bans in effect for many counties across central Texas. We're getting to the time of year, even with rain, we're getting where the grass is becoming more dormant, and that increases the grass and brush fire concern. But we have seen some counties relax and drop those burn bans. But big reminder, if you are under a burn ban, that means any outdoor burning is illegal. So you definitely want to check with your county commissioners, county courthouse, just to make sure that there aren't any burn bans you're in place. But overall, we've seen some nice improvements in the drought conditions over the last week across central Texas.
Thanks to the arrival of our first true fall front of the season last week, it's safe to say the hottest weather of the year is behind us. We now bring in First Alert meteorologist C.D. Finley, who has a recap on the total of 90 and 100-degree days we saw this year.
As the forecast trends ever so cooler as we head further into the fall season, it looks like Central Texas is pretty much done with its share of 90-degree heat in the big 2025. So let's go ahead and take a look and see how our 90-degree stacked up this year. Of course, we saw the peak of those 90-degree days back in August, with 26 recorded in Waco and 27 recorded in both Temple and Killeen. And on average, the first 90-degree day falls right around May 31st, and Killeen definitely beat that expectation with their first 90-degree day back in February. But overall, the most 90-degree days goes to Waco at 130, followed by Killeen at 125, and Temple at 123. But what about our triple-digit heat? Well, Central Texas usually sees about 24 100-degree days on average for every year, with the first occurrence usually being right around July 4th, and the last occurrence being around August 30th. Well, how does that stack up this year? Well, it was definitely below that 24-day per year average. We saw only 6 100-degree days at the Waco Regional Airport, followed by 5 in Temple and 4 in Killeen. But the most 100-degree days goes to the city of Hearn at 13 days at 100 degrees or higher this year. And the hottest temperature recorded in Central Texas in the year of 2025 goes to the McGregor Executive Airport and Corsicana at 104 degrees. From KWTX, I'm First Alert meteorologist C.D. Finley.
Thanks, CD. We got to enjoy some cooler days to end October, and now that we're in November, you may be wondering what we should see as we move through the rest of the month. Here's more on what a normal November in Central Texas should look like. As we enter the second to last month of the year and our days continue to grow shorter over the month, we typically start to feel the chill settle in. At the start of November, our average high is around 74 and drops to 64 by the 30th. And our average morning lows start out at 50 and fall to 41 by the end of the month. There's been some warm days in the November record books. The warmest November temperature is 92 degrees, which happened in 3 different years back in 2017, 1988, and 1948. We also see our average first freeze of the season occur in the month of November. Our average first freeze arrives on the 21st, and per season, we typically see around 34 freezes occur. Now, in the month of November, we average about 3.5 days where temperatures reach 32 degrees or colder, and the coldest low temperature in the month was back on the 29th in the year 1976, when temperatures dropped down to 17 degrees. The wettest November day was back in 1952 on the 23rd, when over 3.5 inches of rain fell at the Waco Regional Airport. On average, we should pick up 2.71 inches of rain over the 30 days in the month. Now, the wettest month was back in 1902, when almost 10.5 inches fell, and there's only been 1 year where absolutely no rain fell, and that happened a year after the wettest month on record. We also average a small amount of snow in Central Texas in the month of November. Since records began back in 1901, we on average see about 1/10 of an inch of snow in the month. In fact, there's been recorded snowfall on 20 out of the 30 days of the month. Most of the records are around trace amounts up to around 1/10 of an inch, so not very much. But the snowiest day in November history was on the 22nd in 1937, when 6.5 inches fell. The same cold front that dropped temperatures in central Texas last week also produced tornadoes as it moved through East Texas. The National Weather Service office in Shreveport traveled to Lindale and the Kilgore communities and confirmed 2 EF1 tornadoes tore through this past Tuesday. Our sister station KLTV was in East Texas following the scene of one of those tornadoes and has more on what some survivors experienced.
It was just chaos. The roof was everywhere, the buildings, roofs off next door, the electricity lines were down, and it was just a scary moment.
Co-owner of Walton's Drive-In, Marie Briggs, drove up to her business in the afternoon, seeing disaster. A section of the building's roof knocked into a nearby fence, and debris made its way into neighboring trees. The building's insulation covered the inside of the building. Walton's employee, Chastity Bouchon, was inside the building during the high winds.
I looked out the window and everything was just going haywire. The roof went. It was just just crazy.
A tree was uprooted in the storm, and it fell on the neighboring property. Biggs also discovered her personal items all over the place.
That was my cat's house, and it sit over there, and look at it. That's a big old freezer.
People with Bassa Resources, an oil and gas company, helped respond to the scene. They worked to clear power lines on the ground and debris out of trees. One woman at the scene said they also replaced the American flag that hung outside the building.
I'm just glad nobody was hurt. I'm just glad that the buildings weren't tore down completely. You know, God was on our side. We're strong. We'll make it back.
Andrew Culver, KLTV 7 News.
Straight ahead on Weather Extra, we hear how one Kansas town rose out of the rubble in an environmentally friendly way after a devastating tornado struck nearly 2 decades ago. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Weather Extra. 18 years ago, Greensburg, Kansas was all but wiped off the map following a devastating tornado. 10 people died and there was $250 million in damage. But they didn't just rebuild. As Ian Lee reports, they made Greensburg green. Take a look.
2 decades on, the memories of Greensburg's darkest moments are still painfully fresh.
It sounded like there was a helicopter up here inside our house, just ripping everything to shreds.
Dee and Tom Korn's home was destroyed by an EF5 tornado, the most powerful possible, along with 95% of Greensburg.
We lost all of our neighbors around us.
Fate dealt Greensburg a cruel blow, but it also gave residents an opportunity.
Now we're a story about a resilient rural community that came back better and stronger.
In the heart of deep red Kansas, Greensburg went green. Today, 100% of its electricity comes from wind energy. Many roofs are lined with solar panels.
What kind of folks make their home in Greensburg?
I'd say people with a pioneer spirit.
Matt Christensen is Greensburg's mayor.
Sustainable features in buildings and communities don't just provide environmental benefits, but also long-term economic benefits.
In the past 10 years, the average cost of electricity has risen just half a penny. In this era of polarization, this small, torn-apart town came together.
Was it hard to convince folks to go green?
Honestly, it wasn't that hard to convince. The city made a conscious effort to not, for example, impose a lot of requirements in our building codes.
And legislating that wouldn't have helped.
Legislating that would have backfired for sure. People don't like being told what to do, but if you work with them and show, oh, this actually makes a lot of sense, you get a lot better results.
But the rebuild also exposed a familiar challenge in rural America.
When you graduated high school, you probably never thought you were going to move back here.
Not really.
Caitlin Aldifer returned to her family's century-old farm, inspired by the town's renewal.
Come here, girls. We've made an example of what you can do.
What are the people of Greensburg now?
We all have this common thing that we share, this disaster that happened to us. And for the most part, we don't think about it, we don't talk about it, but it binds us all together.
Do you miss the old Greensburg?
Yeah. But if I was given an option of the old Greensburg and the new Greensburg, 100% I would go with the new Greensburg.
I hear pride in your voices.
We're proud of our town.
A renewed spirit with renewed energy. For Eye on America, I'm Ian Lee in Greensburg, Kansas.
Coming up next on Weather Extra is this week's Degrees of Science. And in this week's conversation, we learn more about a new study that's taking aim at nearsightedness in kids before it's even diagnosed. We'll be back with more. Welcome back to Weather Extra. Did you know that 1/3 of American adults are nearsighted? This not only impacts your vision, but can lead to more significant complications. In this week's Degrees of Science First Alert, Chief Meteorologist Brady Taylor spoke with a researcher that's starting a new study that's taking aim at nearsightedness in kids before it even gets diagnosed.
Nearsightedness is basically when your eye grows too long. That causes light to focus in front of the retina, or the seeing part of the eye. And when that happens, you have trouble seeing things far away clearly, unless you wear glasses or contact lenses, or even get refractive surgery. Those are the things that we do to try and give you clear vision, make light focus right on the retina.
Is there a certain age that this starts to develop more?
Yeah, it typically starts to develop around age 8 to 10 years old, and it tends to get worse through about age 15 or 16. However, having said that, there's a lot of variability around that.
Why is it so important to try to slow down this process, or how this myopia or nearsightedness progresses in kids?
We know that the more nearsighted someone is, the more likely they are to have sight-threatening complications, mostly as adults. The complications that we might get are retinal detachment, so that seeing part of the eye comes off the back of the eye and you can no longer see through it. You might get choroidal atrophy, which basically causes blind spots in your vision. You're more likely to get cataracts, glaucoma. So lots of different diseases that even if we give you glasses or contact lenses, they don't necessarily help your vision. So we're really trying to avoid those things later in life.
So there's already been some research to show that the medicine atropine will help after someone gets nearsightedness, slow it down. What is your new research study looking to do with this atropine?
Yeah, we want to actually try to delay the onset of nearsightedness, and that can have several benefits. First of all, kids won't need to wear glasses as early as they would have naturally. Probably the more important benefit is we know that the earlier myopia onsets, the more likely you are to have higher myopia as an adult. And so if we can just delay that onset, we think as an adult, you'll have less of a risk of those sight-threatening complications we talked about earlier.
How would people know if their kid may be more prone to have nearsightedness, or is there a test that they can do to figure that out?
So I'd say nearsighted parents or children with nearsightedness, their siblings are more likely to become nearsighted. But the way we determine it is by measuring the prescription of the eye. If you're close to the myopia cliff, then we can give you eye drops to try and delay the onset of myopia. And we can tell with about 90% accuracy who's going to become nearsighted by 8th grade.
To hear the full conversation about this new study in this week's Degrees of Science, scan the QR code on your screen to watch on YouTube, or go to KWTX.com/Degrees of Science. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Weather Extra. With Halloween just a few days behind us, your pantries may be full of sugary candy. But does sugar actually give your kids a sugar rush? Dan Smith shows why that may not be the case in this week's Moment of Science.
Now here's a topic that might get some people's blood pressure up, and you still might not believe me by the end of it. Let's spend a couple minutes exploring the mounting evidence that there's no such thing as a sugar rush. I know, I'm a toddler parent myself, and it sounds really weird at first, but here we go. I want to lead by saying having too much sugar in your bloodstream, or hyperglycemia, is definitely real, as those with diabetes know all too well. When your pancreas can't make enough insulin to break down glucose, it stays in your blood and doesn't effectively reach your cells that need it. That's not our focus today, though. We'll start back in the 1970s when a best-selling book argued that food additives, including refined sugar, were making kids overexcited. Some synthetic food dyes have been linked to hyperactivity in some children, but thorough research has debunked the idea of a huge surge of energy right after eating or drinking overly sugary stuff.
A 1990 study tracked both sugar and aspartame and concluded neither had affected children's behavior or cognitive function, though did leave the door open for sugar having a temporary small effect on a small number of children, particularly those with ADHD. More recently, scientists tracked more than 1,200 people across 31 studies, and there was more evidence of fatigue in the first hour after eating rather than a big kick of energy. Even going for a walk has been found to keep energy levels up for longer than a sweet treat. We'll come back to that. Clinical trials like this and many others are pointing toward that sugar rush being a social one instead. Think of when kids and adults are most likely to get a big sugar intake. Birthday parties, holidays, otherwise big gatherings. You disrupt someone's normal routine, everything's overstimulating, you haven't seen Aunt Ethel in years, and kids get a bit hyper to match the energy of the celebration. Even if it's just you and your child at home, they may be feeding more off your expectation that saccharine food and drink will give them a boost. Yes, in that moment, that candy is going to taste better than broccoli, but that's excitement for some seconds or minutes as opposed to a full hour or two. Chocolate has the added factor of caffeine going for it, though in most cases that's still low enough levels that wouldn't fully explain things either. In that same vein, sugary sports drinks or chews also often have electrolytes, caffeine, etc. to get you through the workout and recovery. Now, there may be no such thing as a sugar rush or sugar high, but there's absolutely such thing as a sugar crash. At the most basic level, sugars are just carbohydrates. Think of how you feel right after eating a bunch of carbs, like a full plate of pasta. Not exactly bouncing off the walls, are you? Those kinds of carbs are better for storing energy in the longer term. Meanwhile, you may not have loopy energy when you're overtired, but sugar or not, oh boy, a kid sure does. The long and short is, it's not 100% conclusive. Sugar can make you happy while you're having it, and eating sugar when your glucose is already running low can bring you back up to sustainable levels. Now, mind you, American adults consume an average of 60 pounds of added sugars per year, so most of us could stand to cut back a bit anyway. I might need some extra energy to read the comment section after all of this. For this week's Moment of Science, I'm Dan Smith.
That's all we have for you for this week's episode of Weather Extra. Tune in again next weekend for another half hour of weather and science. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.